Also, another defensive position change. Brandon Gomes, this is from our good friend Joel Sherman, our colleague. Brandon Gomes, general manager of the Dodgers, of course, said the assumption right now is that Mookie Betts will move back to the infield. He was asked about this at the GM meetings, and Gomes said it could be second, it could be short. We really don't know just yet. I'm surprised here. Now, again, here are the splits of position, the defensive run save. I wouldn't go crazy on this because there's conflicting metrics. Look, he got moved off shortstop. He could handle it. And very few guys, actually nobody in the history of the game has ever gone in his 30s to play shortstop and just did it.
From right field.
Kudos to him, right. But you know what? At second base, he can clearly field that position. But I don't know, watching him in the playoffs, Jake, he's a magnificent right fielder. Yeah. Kind of the difference between the Dodgers and the Yankees, where, again, the extra bases that we're talking about that the Dodgers did not allow, that the Yankees did, a lot of them came from Mookie Betts, who was just making plays like simple plays that don't make highlights, but like that. You know what I mean? His range is fantastic. They say like the wear and tear is a little less at second base. I didn't know that. You played more baseball than I did. I thought it was much more in the infield than the outfield. You tell me.
Completely agree with this. I don't necessarily agree with this, but I think it's geared at Brandon Gomes and Friedman and staff really understanding how valuable their flexibility within their roster just proves to be in this run of being able to get Tommy Edman and Rojas in there when it was matchup related. You see roster flexibility is huge. The Padres have a lot of that same kind of thing of moving guys around and trying to figure it out. I think Mookie just creates a big issue that he can go anywhere. I don't like him at shortstop, though. I think it was a lot to ask. I think you hit it on the head. He can do it, but he's not above average. You want to be as strong as you could ever be at the shortstop position. I hope it's second base, but I think he's better suited.
I'm surprised
he's as good as right fielder, if not the best we have in the game.
We just saw. I'm using a lot of eye tests here. There's defensive metrics, look, that conflict. Some you believe, some you don't. And with Betts, you know, he's not staying at shortstop. I'd be stunned if that happens, but he can go where he wants. He's Mookie Betts. Also, the Cardinals making a decision here. This is a little more concrete. This is John Mozeliak, Derek Gould putting this out. John Mozeliak, president of baseball ops, on Wilson Contreras moving to first base DH. It's part of him wanting to stay with the Cardinals, an idea of keeping him healthy. It's unlikely he will catch much. Now, Contreras has always had kind of a spotty catching history with the Cardinals. Remember, they benched him briefly? Here's how the bat would play at first base. Contreras, Jake, hits so well. This year is a 136 OPS plus. If you stick him at first base, that bat plays. He'd be the fourth best hitter among all first basemen in baseball this past season. So the bat plays.
It plays when he's squatting and has no legs in the second half. We watch catchers just so I think those numbers could even have a potential to go up with him at first base. We've got to give this young man some credit. They signed him to a huge deal, and I'm not sure if they knew what they were getting or did their homework, but immediately they had problems with him behind the plate. He has kept his head down and performed where things could have went bad. This is what I'll say about St. Louis is I think they like the Ivan Herrera kid. You've got Yadier Molina, the catcher of all catchers there. Please invite him around if he's not to teach the catcher how to be the captain of the defense. The catcher has to run the pitching staff and be the captain of the defense first and foremost. I think they're going to try to get back to that in this move. And look, they're not going to miss much at first base with what Contreras is going to bring.
Right, Paul Goldschmidt, is gone, and obviously the hitting is there. It's one of his better hitting seasons for Contreras. I would say the defensive metrics have never been terrible on Contreras, but there's more than the standard, getting balls in the dirt and framing and that sort of thing. He's not a very good framer, but I guess it is calling the staff. That part of the
game.
He
had David Ross over there when they won a championship, and he was real young. He had David Ross, what ended up being a major league manager, helping him really manage the game. And because he's an offensive catcher, when you hit that well, you want to hit and be focused on that. A catcher can never, within the game, be focused on hitting until he gets on deck. Other than that, he is game planning of how to get through the next inning and being the captain of that defense.
You're speaking as a pitcher, of course. I don't care how you hit. I need you to catch me.
If they don't score,
that's it.
We can't lose, BK.
You got used to Molina back there in St. Louis. We'll take a short break. When we come back, the top tier in the starting pitcher free agent market. What is the difference? Burns, Snell, Fried. That's next on MLB Tonight. All right, Brian Kenny back here on MLB Tonight. Jake will join us in just a moment. We are just getting into free agent season, and it is an interesting talent pool. Not especially deep, though, and not very deep in pitching. The free agents at the very top will command attention and money. let's do a little digging in. There is a top tier of free agent starting pitcher. Guys like Yusei Kikuchi, Jack Flaherty, Walker Buehler have all had success in different ways, but their track records are all a bit more erratic. Same thing for Sean Manaea and Luis Severino. So the top tier is Corbin Burnes, Blake Snell, and Max Fried. The most durable of the three is Corbin Burnes. Over the last 3 years, he's averaged 197 innings a season with a 1.31 ERA+. This is a pitcher who is the #1 starting pitcher in our ranking series top 10 right now 2 years ago. #1. This past season for the Orioles, he had a rough spell down the stretch, but finished with 194 innings and a 2.92 ERA. 4th in the American League. But here's something that's concerning. Burnes is entering his age 30 season. His fastball velocity is holding steady. This year, it was sitting 95.5 miles per hour. That's the same it was in his best years, and these were his best years, 2021 mainly. But look at the strikeout percentage, K percentage, from 35%, nearly 36, 30, 25 to 23 every single year. His whiff rate, that's within the strikeouts, just swing and miss, and his xWOBA. You go back 4 years ago, he was 97th and 99th percentile, tops in the league. Look at this xWOBA, 219. That's your opponent's quality of contact mixed in with everything else. 219 up to 273, 285, 284. It's up drastically. He's throwing hard. He's having success overall. But, I mean, you look right here, the whiff rate, the K rate, he's not missing bats at the same rate. A guy who is missing bats is Blake Snell. He'll be entering his age 32 season, and this past year, he was 2nd in baseball in strikeout percentage, behind only Garrett Crochet, and just ahead of phenom Paul Skeens. That's super elite territory. Now, Snell is not very durable. He got a late start this year with the Giants because of his prolonged free agency, ended up with just over 100 innings pitched. But over his last 14 starts, when he was fully healthy, he threw 80 innings to a tune of a staggering 1.23 ERA. That's not a misprint. 1.23. Reminiscent of his stretch run in 2023 when he won the National League Cy Young Award. Here's something that might surprise you. Snell this year never qualified for the ERA title, so he didn't get that much attention. But over the last 2 seasons, for those with at least 250 innings, Blake Snell's park-adjusted ERA is behind only Tarek Skubal of the Tigers. He's been mercurial in years past, but Snell, the last 2 years, he's an elite pitcher. Corbin Burnes, by the way, is 16th, and we put up a top 6 there, so we can get to that guy at the very end on the far right. That's Max Fried. Let's talk Max Fried. He's going into his age 31 season, came off multiple injuries in 2023, was under 75 innings, but he threw 174 innings this year with a decent 3.25 ERA. He's not a big swing and miss guy. He sits only 94. But this year, he was 96th percentile in ground ball rate, 95th percentile in average exit velocity, the only pitcher in baseball to be 95th percentile or better in those 2 metrics. So what does he do? He keeps the ball on the ground, and he gets weak contact. Now, Fried has also not been durable, but 3 of the last 4 years, he's thrown over 160 innings. That's the norm these days. And in terms of basic run prevention, here are the last 4 years. Among those with at least 400 innings, only Shohei Ohtani has a better park-adjusted ERA. Fried, over a large sample in this new generation, as Verlander, Scherzer, Kershaw step aside, is one of the best pitchers in the game. All right, Jake Peavy joining us now. So, yeah, I'm trying to paint the full picture, Jake, of what these guys are. Give me your overall thoughts, starting where you like.
I like Blake Snell over the other 2 guys just a tick because of what you mentioned, his last 14 starts and what we saw in 2023. I saw him lead the league in walks in 2023, and I watched him this year cut down on that and even get better than the version of 2023 we saw when he was at the top. So Blake Snell, when I think of him and I think of these 3 guys, if I have to win a playoff game and I'm trying to make that October gauntlet to the World Series, when this guy goes out there and is right, it is win day. The other team has no shot. So Blake Snell would get a slight edge. I also, look, last night I said why I love Corbin Burnes. I see what you're talking about with the soft contact down.
Explain that to me exactly, because again, he had a sub-3 ERA, but he's not getting the swing and miss. He's not getting the strikeouts. Is that concerning, or is that the way he's pitching?
I'll say this: 2021, when you're talking about the xWOBA down at around 219, that was the first year of Corbin Burnes being a primary cutter guy. The league hadn't seen it yet, and he took it by storm. The other, when I'm watching it kind of the last 3 years, it's kind of planed out and dropped a touch, but not like we saw in that first year. A little bit of that is the league adjusting to him, but the game plan, I think, against Corbin Burnes is don't let him get to 2 strikes, right? And they're trying to go attack him early, so I think that some of that is playing into those numbers being down, but some of it is just getting older and not.
See, that's it's that each year it's going down. It'd be one thing if you could have a blip, but it seems to be going in a certain direction.
It scares me, but what I'll say is his command makes up for that. You know, it's just important. To be a number 1 starter, you got to have an elite pitch. You have to have elite command, and then you got to have 4 different looks in my book. And I think Corbin Burnes has all that. Still, in number 1 starter, 8 innings in the postseason, we saw he's a stud. I know that that's concerning with what you showed, but and then look, we got to talk about Max Fried. I think Max Fried is an absolute stud. We're talking 20-plus postseason starts. This guy's done it in the biggest of times. I know he hadn't always showed up, and that's been some people's mix, and I can listen to that. But when we talk about, you said it, soft contact, getting the ball on the ground, the swing and miss is not through the roof. But this young man just spent a year with Chris Sale. I know a lot of people around Max Fried that love him. He's a California boy. I know some of these California teams are going to be in the mix. But as somebody who pulls locally for the Atlanta Braves, I know what Max Fried has been.
Well, we love all these guys, but you got to love them to the tune of $27 to $33 million a year, right? So you're marrying these guys basically. You've got to really love the mix and try to do it long term. Like now, I think the industry believes a little more in Blake Snell, but this is the high-end market.
How long of a deal would you give these guys? 5 years?
Well, what I would give as to what the market would do, but I think the market is angling more toward, if these guys are all 30, 31, 32,
That's what I'm saying.
We're looking at a max of 6, 7 years. I don't think the industry's going longer than that.
Look, I don't think so either. The length of contract scares me. But when you talk about Max Fried, the 3 of the last 4 years, 160 innings, that is reliable for me. Corbin Burnes is reliable. I know Blake can be hit or miss, but when he's right, he's as good as anybody in the game.
Right.
For 5 years, I'm giving these guys what they want because every one of them is going right to the top of my rotation. You're penciling them in on their postseason starts. And if I'm signing these guys, I'm trying to get to the postseason, and I'm telling each one of these 3 guys on your day in the series, that's win day. We've got 2 wins of the 4 we need when you get one of these guys on your team.
Right, when you go to the high end.
And he's rolling.
Right, go to the high end of the market. Speaking of which, the Orioles are losing Corbin Burnes more than likely, and I expected to bring him back via free agency. What Mike Elias's plan is for those young Orioles who really swooned at the end but have one of the best young cores in all of baseball. We'll hear from the GM of the Baltimore Orioles when we come back. We return here on MLB Tonight. There is the site of the general managers' meetings, which wrapped up today in San Antonio, Texas. Let's hear from John Morosi and Bob Nightingale of USA Today as they wrap up the events and the biggest stories as we start the free agency season.
Thank you. The GM meetings have adjourned here in San Antonio. Stunningly, Juan Soto hasn't signed yet. Joined by Bob Nightingale. Bob, what more do we know now that we maybe didn't know last weekend?
Not really much. I think there's only a few teams involved. It's like having a mansion in a regular neighborhood. I mean, you're only going to have 2 or 3 bidders. I think realistically, you got the 2 New York teams, Toronto, San Francisco. I can't see anybody else.
So do you think the industry will be waiting a lot between now and the winter meetings on Soto, or do you see other players like an Anthony Santander, a Christian Walker, potentially a Teoscar Hernandez who could sign before Soto does?
I think he could definitely sign. Almost a little bit like Ohtani. There's just a few people involved in that thing. So I don't think even the Yankees, I think at some point will say, hey, here's our number. You want to take it or not? If you're not, see you later. But I think even the Yankees are making contingency plans.
You've watched Christian Walker a lot in Arizona over the years. What kind of a profile does he have now in free agency?
I think it's really spiked. As much as people are talking about Pete Alonso, I think just many people, if not more, interested in Christian Walker. You can get him for about half the price. He's 34 years old, 3-time Gold Glove winner, great clubhouse leader. I think he's going to end up with one of the New York teams. But I think he might even have more value with some teams than Pete Alonso.
I've heard a lot in the last couple of days about Teoscar Hernandez and the amount of interest in him. I look at a couple of American League East teams, Bob, in the Red Sox and the Orioles, who both need right-handed power, possibly being really good fits for Teoscar.
Yeah, I think his stock just rose all season long. I mean, he was the glue of that team, and so popular. And you saw all the Dodger players saying, hey, he's the reason we're in the World Series, reason we won the World Series. He loves L.A. I'd be a little surprised if the Dodgers let him walk just because he meant that much to that franchise.
It was so interesting looking at last year's free agent starting pitching market and how, in a lot of ways, Bob, the Royals did as well as anybody else with Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo, whereas you had some other pitchers like Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery who had to wait a long time to get their contracts. How do you see last year's market illustrating how this year's market could unfold?
I think guys will sign earlier now. I mean, it seems like a lot more talk about the starting market. Last year's the relief market. And I think the struggles those guys had. I mean, Blake Snell struggled badly the whole first half. Jordan Montgomery really never got on track. I think it's kind of a case study for these guys. Say, hey, let's sign early. We cannot be late for spring training or miss spring training, or it's going to be a nightmare.
Then, of course, the trade market for starting pitchers, in a lot of ways, headlined by Garrett Crochet. We saw the famous Chris Sale trade years ago. Red Sox, White Sox, do you see possibly with Garrett Crochet?
I do. I mean, I think the Phillies are all over Crochet. I think they would have wanted him at the trade deadline. I'd be shocked if he's not traded. I think White Sox are playing it smart. Let everybody bid on this guy. They're going to get a ton for him. Now there's no inning restriction. There's no, hey, I'm not going to pitch the postseason unless I'm a starter. So I think his value is just rising.
Ha-Sung Kim's name is very popular as well, Bob, during the course of this week. For the San Diego Padres, he's been a very versatile player, second base, shortstop. He can move around the diamond for you. There was, of course, the injury concern toward the end of the season, but where do you see his market lining up?
Yeah, very popular among the GMs as well. Scott Boras said he'll be fine by spring training. The Padres love this guy. They just don't have room for him. They got about 7 shortstops as it is. But I think he's going to have a heck of a market just because he's so versatile. He puts the ball in play. I mean, teams are looking for that now. Teams like the Padres who didn't strike out, much at all. They love guys like this to put the ball in play.
The team that knocked the Padres out of the playoffs, the Dodgers, of course, now the reigning World Series champions. They could do some work on that infield, though. We heard the news yesterday, Mookie Betts moving back to the infield. And I still think, Bob, that we could see Willy Adames sign with the Dodgers before all is said and done.
We could. I mean, his personality, too, is like a perfect Dodger. It was like Kiki Hernandez loves the spotlight, loves the attention. I tell you what, as good as the Dodgers were last year, I think the Dodgers would be better next year. They're going to get about 6 studs coming off the injured list among the pitchers. So, yeah, I think they'll be electrifying to watch.
このオフシーズン、MLB の動きがさらに白熱してきましたね。アトランタ・ブレーブスやニューヨーク・ヤンキース、サンディエゴ・パドレス、そしてロサンゼルス・ドジャースといったチームが次のシーズンに向けてどのように戦略を練り強化しているのかが見どころです。ファンにとっては選手の移籍やポジション変更のニュースを追っかけるだけでも興奮が止まりません。特にムーキー・ベッツのポジション変更には多くの注目が集まっています。ドジャースの総支配人であるブランドン・ゴームズはベッツを外野から内野に戻す方針を示しており、セカンドベースやショートのどちらになるかはまだ未定としています。外野での彼の守備力や素晴らしい範囲は、すでに多くのファンや移設者に称賛されていますが、内野に戻ることで新たなチャレンジとなるでしょう。特に彼がどのように新たなポジションで適応し、チームの柔軟性を生かしていくのかは、今後のシーズンを左右する重要な要素になるかもしれません。また、ウィルソン・コントレラスの起用方法も話題になっています。セントルイス・カージナルスでは、彼をファーストベースや指名打者 DH として起用することで、彼の打撃力を最大限に発揮させる狙いです。カージナルスにとっては、攻撃力のある彼を捕手の役割から解放し、より安定した打撃力を維持できるようにすることがチームの大きな強みとなるでしょう。彼の打率とパワーは他の一流打者と比べても遜色なく、ファーストベースでの活躍がどのような結果を生むのか、ファンも期待していることでしょう。ピッチャー市場も大きな注目ポイントです。コービン・バーンズ、ブレイク・スネル、そしてマックス・フリードといったトップクラスの投手たちが今後どのチームに加入するのかは多くのファンが関心を寄せています。バーンズはその安定感とパワフルなピッチングスタイルで評価が高く、スネルはここ数年で高い奪三振率を誇っています。一方、フリードは 特に弱い打球を打たせる能力に優れており、投球スタイルが他の投手と異なる点が魅力です。彼らの移籍先によって各チームの戦力が大きく変わる可能性があり、今後の展開が待ち遠しいですね。さらに、ファン外の動向にも目が離せません。彼は現在、ニューヨーク、ヤンキースやメッツといった強豪チームが獲得を狙っていると言われていますが、ボルチモア、オリオールズのような意外なチームも彼の獲得に興味を示しています。外のような実力派の選手が次にどのチームでプレーするのかは、ファンにとって大きな関心事です。彼が新しいチームでどのようなインパクトを与えるのか、想像するだけでもワクワクしますね。ドジャースに関しては、ムーキー・ベッツのポジション変更だけでなく、ウィリーやアダメスの加入も噂されています。彼のような選手が加わることで、ドジャースの内野がさらに強化されるだけでなく、チーム全体の士気も高まるでしょう。さらに、怪我から復帰する選手たちが揃い、来シーズンには一層のパワーアップが期待されます。ドジャースのファンとしては、これ以上ない喜びですね。カージナルスもまた、ウィルソン、コントレラスをファーストベースや指名打者として起用することで、彼の持ち味である攻撃力を最大限に生かそうとしています。彼がファーストベースで見せる打撃力は、他の一流選手にも引けを取らず、カージナルスのチーム力を押し上げること、間違いありません。また、若手キャッチャーの育成にも力を入れており、カージナルスが長年培ってきた保守の伝統を次世代に引き継ごうとする姿勢が見られます。カージナルスファンにとっても期待が膨らむシーズンとなるでしょう。このように MLB のオフシーズンは各チームの戦略や移籍の動きが交錯し、今後のシーズンを大きく左右する重要な期間です。皆さんも好きな選手やチームがどのように評価されるのか興味津々ではないでしょうか。ぜひコメント欄で皆さんの意見や期待をシェアしてください。いいねとチャンネル登録もお忘れなく、最新の MLB ニュースやハイライトをお届けするので、これからも一緒に MLB の世界を楽しんでいきましょう。